Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't exist? Not in some deep philosophical way, but literally ignored, dismissed, erased. That's exactly what happened to one man's best friend, until the truth came out. What the hotel staff didn't know was that the quiet man in worn clothes wasn't just any guest. He owned the entire empire. And when he saw how his black friend was treated, everything changed. This is a story of power, justice, and the quiet storm that changed a luxury hotel forever. If you believe respect should never depend on how someone looks, hit that subscribe button. We share true inspired stories that reveal what really matters: humanity, dignity, and the courage to stand up when no one else will. Let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? The rain had just begun to fall when Gray Wallace pulled his hood a little lower and stepped out of the black sedan. The car was nothing fancy, not the type one would expect a man of his wealth to use. No chauffeur, no entourage, just a solitary figure dressed in worn jeans, a slightly faded jacket, and old sneakers that had seen better days. His beard, carefully unkempt, added to the illusion. In this getup, no one would guess that Gray Wallace, age 52, was the billionaire founder and owner of one of the most successful luxury hotel chains on the continent. That was precisely the point. Gray had built his empire on the values of exceptional service, inclusion, and humility. The entire brand ethos was that everyone, no matter who they were or what they looked like, would be treated like royalty the second they stepped foot into his hotels. But lately, troubling rumors had reached his ears. A growing number of complaints, subtle but consistent, pointed to a disturbing pattern. Certain guests, often people of color, were being treated as second-class citizens in one of his flagship locations downtown. It wasn't enough to rely on middle managers or PR reports. He had learned long ago that the only way to see the truth was to go and see it for himself. But he wouldn't be doing it alone. Waiting just around the corner, pacing slowly near a pretzel stand, was Marcus Dean. Marcus was his oldest friend, closer than a brother. The two of them had met in college when neither had a dime, hustling between classes and part-time jobs, sharing big dreams and late-night ramen. Now, Marcus was a successful businessman in his own right, with a thriving tech firm and a reputation for philanthropy. He also happened to be black, and it was Marcus whom Gray had asked to help him run this little experiment. Gray had explained everything in the car. Marcus would go in first, dressed plainly but respectfully, and try to book a room at the front desk. No advance reservation, just a walk-in request. Gray would watch from a distance, noting every detail, every reaction, every subtle cue. Then Gray himself would walk in, not as an executive or owner, but as another potential guest, a second data point in a test neither of them hoped to fail. Marcus nodded as they shook hands briefly under the rain. He stepped through the rotating glass doors into the marble-clad lobby of the hotel, and Gray took his position on a bench across the street, beneath the canopy of a closed cafe, just close enough to see the reception desk through the window. The hotel lobby was as magnificent as he remembered it. Gleaming chandeliers, polished floors, a grand piano tucked into one corner, and a scent of fresh orchids subtly perfuming the air. But none of that mattered if the people inside failed to live up to the principles he had built this empire on. From where Gray sat, he watched Marcus approach the front desk with a calm, respectful posture. The front desk clerk on duty was a white woman in her early 30s, slim, sharply dressed, with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Her name tag read Mandy. She was leaning against the counter, phone in hand, tapping away with long red nails that clicked softly against the glass screen. Marcus stood patiently for nearly a full minute before Mandy even acknowledged his presence. Even then, her posture didn't change. She looked up briefly, said something, and immediately resumed typing on her phone. Gray's jaw tightened. It was already beginning. He watched as Marcus tried to engage, pointing at something, likely a request for room availability. Mandy barely looked at her screen before shaking her head. Her expression was flat, her body language closed. Then she dismissed him entirely, turning away and continuing to scroll on her device as if Marcus no longer existed. Gray felt the anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to remain still. He had to observe. Marcus looked over his shoulder toward the door, but didn't react outwardly. Instead, he calmly nodded, turned around, and walked out, the way dignity always walked, with silence and restraint. They crossed paths just a few steps from the hotel entrance. Marcus gave him a single nod, his face a mask of neutrality, though his eyes carried the weight of disappointment. Gray gave him a light touch on the shoulder, a silent, "I saw everything," before turning and heading toward the hotel himself. Inside, the lobby seemed even colder now. The ornate beauty of the space felt hollow, as if the chandeliers and gilded trim were merely distractions from something rotten underneath. Gray approached the desk, observing Mandy carefully. She hadn't moved. She didn't even glance up until he tapped the edge of the counter gently with 2 fingers. This time, she looked. Not much more welcomingly, but at least she spoke. Gray asked for a room, not too cheerfully, not arrogantly, just as any tired traveler would. She sighed, actually sighed, and tapped at her computer for a few seconds. Then she told him they had 1 room left. He accepted without question. She handed him a key card labeled Room 405 and didn't offer any further assistance. No explanation, no guidance, no warmth. Gray thanked her softly and made his way toward the elevators. Room 405 was exactly what he expected. It was a small, lower-tier room tucked near the elevators and just across from a service closet. The view from the window was a brick wall and an industrial garbage area out back. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. He had gotten what he came for. He pulled a thin black laptop from his satchel and opened the secure internal system that governed every hotel in his network. As the screen lit up, his fingers moved with mechanical precision. First, he checked the room inventory. There were at least 9 higher-tier rooms available. Mandy had lied. Next, he reviewed the security footage from the lobby, syncing the timestamps of Marcus's interaction. It was all there. The dismissiveness, the disinterest, the casual contempt. Finally, he accessed the reservation logs. Marcus had attempted to book a room. His name had been manually entered, then deleted within 30 seconds. The user ID, M.Thomas, front desk level access. Mandy. The same thing had happened to Gray's own placeholder profile. His assistant had created a shell reservation under a fake name to test if the staff would notice or try to remove it. Deleted. Also by Mandy. He leaned back in the chair, processing everything. What had once been suspicion was now evidence. Solid, undeniable, time-stamped proof. It wasn't just bad customer service. It was targeted discrimination. Quiet and unspoken, but unmistakable. And Mandy wasn't new. He remembered her hiring file from 2 years ago, strong resume, glowing interviews. But the complaints began within the first 6 months. Gray pulled up internal complaint reports. There were over 24 mentions of her name, many citing rudeness or vague, inappropriate treatment, at check-in. None had resulted in formal disciplinary action. That, too, was telling. Gray closed the laptop gently and exhaled. He glanced around the room, modest, comfortable, serviceable, but it wasn't what he paid attention to. He was thinking now, calculating next steps, setting a mental timeline. What Mandy didn't know was that she hadn't just disrespected two random guests. She had disrespected the man who had built this entire world she stood in. The carpets under her feet, the desk she leaned on, the system she misused. And she had just failed the test of humanity in the most spectacular way. The real reckoning would begin in the morning. But tonight, Gray would rest, not out of fatigue, but with the calm of a man who knew the storm he was about to bring would be righteous, thorough, and unforgettable. Morning came with an unassuming grace, the kind of soft light that filtered through the blinds without apology or announcement. Gray Wallace rose before the alarm he hadn't set, the kind of instinctive alertness honed over decades of being the man who built, watched, and protected his empire. He stood at the small window of room 405, observing the alley below, rusty dumpsters, a delivery truck, and the distant noise of a service elevator humming through the walls. This was not the image his hotel chain sold to the public. But today, the truth mattered more than appearances. He moved with calm precision, dressing in the same modest clothes from the night before. No branded shirts, no designer accessories, no signals of wealth. Only his laptop, his credentials, and the truth. By the time he entered the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby, he was already several steps ahead in his mind. The lobby had regained its morning rhythm. Business travelers checking out, bellboys carting luggage with white gloves, and a barista prepping overpriced espressos for tourists in suits and sneakers. Mandy was back at the desk, her nails freshened, her expression detached and unreadable. She wore her uniform like armor, flawless, sharp, impenetrable. But Gray wasn't here to read faces. He was here to expose patterns. He didn't acknowledge her immediately. Instead, he found a seat in the corner of the lobby, opened his laptop, and began reviewing the previous night's data. What he had gathered was staggering in its clarity. Reservation deletion logs, internal access timestamps, guest profiles cross-referenced against staff behaviors, and, most damning of all, video footage. There was no ambiguity. This was not a mistake. This was targeted negligence. Gray knew that patterns didn't lie. And what he saw was that Mandy had developed a habit of filtering guests, offering warmth and high-quality service to those she deemed appropriate, and systematically downgrading, ignoring, or outright erasing others. He had witnessed it with Marcus and again with himself. But it went beyond them. Several guests with African, Hispanic, or South Asian names had similar patterns attached to their profiles. Deleted reservations, technical issues, coded language that masked a very human ugliness. After hours of silent work, Gray made one final move. He initiated an administrative lockdown on the hotel's booking system. Through his owner credentials, he set a hard freeze. No new reservations could be made, modified, or deleted without corporate-level approval. Then, he sent a quiet directive to the internal audit team. Activate full inspection mode for this location with immediate effect. An automated email notification would hit every department manager's inbox within 60 seconds. But Gray didn't stop there. He reviewed complaints submitted over the last 18 months. Patterns emerged with a painful consistency. Mandy's name showed up time and time again. Descriptions varied, but the themes were clear. Dismissiveness, denial of service, abrupt tone, and a frequent line, "It must be a system issue." He cross-checked these with staff schedules. Mandy had been working every single time those complaints were made. And yet, despite this flood of warning signs, no disciplinary action had ever been recorded. Why? Because of Tyler Vinn, the general manager. Tyler had a reputation Gray had been skeptical of, but never acted on. Charismatic during meetings, quick to deflect accountability, always presenting data in a way that made things seem under control. Gray had once described him to a board member as all flash, no spine. And now, the consequences of that cowardice had begun to rot the very foundation of what should have been a flawless guest experience. Gray closed his laptop and rose to his feet, his body language unhurried, even casual. He approached the front desk again. Mandy looked up, not recognizing him from the night before. That fact alone added another quiet mark to her list of sins. She asked if he needed help. He requested to speak with the manager. Her brows twitched for half a second, a signal of instinctive resistance. But she called for Tyler anyway. Tyler emerged from the back office wearing a fitted blazer, forced charm on his face, and a Bluetooth headset hanging off one ear. His expression flickered the moment he saw Gray. Recognition hit like a slap. His composure faltered. In an instant, he knew who was standing before him. Not a common guest, but the man who owned the very carpet beneath his polished shoes. Gray didn't greet him. Instead, he turned toward Mandy, typing rapidly at her station. Without raising his voice, Gray asked to see her system. Mandy hesitated, unsure if she had a choice. She turned the monitor slightly, showing him the live booking grid. Gray leaned in, tapped a few keys, and brought up the audit logs, his credentials giving him instant access to restricted information. He pulled up the deletions from the night before. There it was. Marcus Dean. Reservation deleted. Guest profile flagged for wrong location redirected. No such redirection had taken place. No such policy existed. Below it, Gray's alias profile. Deleted within 30 seconds of arrival. The screen didn't lie. The timestamps didn't lie. The login ID didn't lie. Gray turned the monitor slightly toward Mandy, her face drained of color. Tyler looked between them, beginning to panic. The air in the lobby shifted. Whispers had started. A couple at the concierge desk was watching, and even the barista behind the counter paused mid-pour. Gray stepped back, pulled out his phone, and made a single call. The line clicked. He gave a short directive. Lockdown confirmed, full audit authorized, compensation protocols initiated for affected guests. Then he turned to Tyler. No anger, just precision. He reminded him of the long string of ignored warnings, the lazy delegation, the willful blindness. Tyler stammered something about misunderstanding, about miscommunication, but Gray wasn't listening. He was done listening. Gray told Tyler exactly what would happen. First, both Mandy and Tyler were terminated. Not suspended, not reviewed, terminated. Second, every guest who had lodged a discrimination-related complaint in the past year would receive a personal letter, a refund, and complimentary stays for the next 2 visits. Third, this hotel would undergo a complete leadership restructuring. And last, Gray himself would handpick the next general manager, someone who understood not just business but people. When Mandy began to protest, Gray didn't even look at her. He instructed security to escort both her and Tyler off the premises immediately. Their access cards were deactivated before they reached the front door. The entire lobby stood in stunned silence. Gray turned to the remaining staff at the front desk, young, wide-eyed, uncertain. He spoke calmly, no shouting, no theatrics, just truth. He told them what this hotel was supposed to represent, not marble and chandeliers, not upcharges and profit margins, but dignity, respect, humanity. And then he did something no one expected. He asked if any of them had ever felt unable to speak up. A few nodded. One even wiped her eyes. Gray promised them this. From now on, silence would no longer be policy. Then, finally, he picked up the hotel phone, dialed corporate, and gave the final order for full operational reset. By the time the call ended, everyone in that lobby understood one thing. This man was not just another guest. This man was the reason the hotel existed in the first place. The hotel lobby buzzed with whispers long after Mandy and Tyler were escorted out. The grand space, designed to impress, now stood as a quiet monument to reckoning. Gray Wallace, still dressed in the same plain clothes he had arrived in, remained a figure of calm authority amid the swirling undercurrent of curiosity and realization. His presence now fully recognized, the employees looked at him not with fear, but with a dawning awareness that something larger than policy or protocol had unfolded before their eyes. This wasn't just about mismanagement or poor service. This was about dignity, the very soul of hospitality, and Gray had made it personal. He returned to his modest room, not because he needed a moment, but to regroup and prepare for the next phase. The storm was not over. A temporary purge could satisfy the surface, but the deeper rot needed deeper excavation. Gray wasn't a man who believed in vengeance. He believed in correction, forceful when necessary but never blind. The institution had failed, and it was his to fix, not just by punishing wrongdoers, but by ensuring that such wrongs had no chance to grow again. He began by reopening the audit reports. Every guest who had filed a discrimination-related complaint within the past 2 years was listed. He went through them personally, reading each story, each frustration. They weren't just data points, they were moments of trust broken. Some guests had tried to explain their experiences through corporate channels, only to be dismissed. Some had simply never returned. He noted every name and cross-referenced their accounts. He composed personalized messages to each one, not boilerplate apologies, but direct acknowledgments signed by his own hand, offering full refunds, extended stays, and a private hotline for future concerns. Then came the matter of internal reform. Gray initiated a policy change across the entire hotel network. From this moment forward, all front desk employees would undergo implicit bias training, mandatory, recurring, and tied to performance evaluation. He didn't just want better hospitality, he wanted aware hospitality. The kind that didn't wait for a guest to escalate their voice before being heard. His laptop chimed with incoming responses. Members of the board, regional directors, longtime partners who had heard what happened and were waiting to know if the story was true. Gray wrote a single internal memo and sent it to every employee in the company, from janitors to senior executives. The subject line read, "What we stand for." The message was simple but clear. He described what had happened, admitted where leadership had failed, and reaffirmed the company's founding principle, that every guest is equal and sacred, and that service without respect is no service at all. He didn't just speak as the owner. He spoke as a man who had watched his friend be dismissed, as a founder who had witnessed the decay of his own vision. He made a promise. It would never happen again, not under his name. Then he returned to the lobby. The air had shifted. Staff members stood straighter. Their eyes followed him not with anxiety but with attention. He walked to the front desk where a young man named Derek, barely in his 20s, was now manning the counter. Derek looked nervous but determined. Gray asked him a few questions, not to test him, but to understand his experience. Derek admitted that he had seen things, but never felt he had the right to speak up. That stopped today. Gray pulled out a simple envelope and handed it to Derek. Inside were instructions, not only for Derek to serve as interim lead for the desk, but also an invitation to corporate headquarters to assist in rethinking customer service standards across all properties. Derek's eyes widened. No speech could have had more impact. But Gray wasn't finished. He made one final call. Marcus. His old friend arrived 20 minutes later, walking through the front doors with a composed step, dressed in casual elegance, the kind that needed no explanation. The moment he entered, heads turned, not because of how he looked, but because now everyone understood exactly who he was. The man who had been turned away, erased from the system, disregarded without a second thought. He had been the key to revealing it all. Gray stood waiting, arms open. The two embraced not as business partners, not as symbols, but as brothers who had just exposed a hidden sickness in a place that was supposed to stand for equality. Then, in a moment that stunned the room, Gray stepped aside and let Marcus take his place at the front desk. There, before a crowd of guests and employees, Marcus addressed the room. He spoke not from a place of bitterness, but from experience. He told them he wasn't angry. He was disappointed, because what had happened wasn't just unfair, it was familiar. He explained that he hadn't come for a room. He came for a truth. Gray stood beside him, silent and proud. When Marcus finished, the lobby broke into respectful applause, not for performance, but for courage. People understood that they had witnessed not a stunt, but a restoration. Afterward, Marcus and Gray sat in the lounge over coffee. It was quiet again, peaceful, the kind of calm that follows a storm when the air feels clearer and the world seems slightly more honest. A new staff member approached timidly, holding 2 sets of VIP welcome packets. She offered them to Marcus with a kind smile and a genuine tone. Marcus thanked her, then looked at Gray. "I think they're starting to get it," he said. Gray nodded, sipping his coffee, his mind already moving toward the next location, the next audit, the next lesson. But in this moment, he allowed himself to breathe. Because this wasn't just about cleaning a hotel, it was about defending the invisible, amplifying the silenced, and reminding the powerful that real leadership wears no badge, no title, and often no suit. And now, everyone knew exactly who he was. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We tell stories that matter, about justice, humanity, and the moments that reveal who we truly are. And hey, before you go, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too.